Here is an update on the Chevy K10. This is the Rust-Oleum Sand. It's tan. So that's going to be the new color of the truck. We got a 3-inch body lift on it now. It's going to have 8-inch springs, 40-inch boggers, and black wheels. So they look pretty good. It's still a mud truck. Just going to be a really nice looking mud truck. The trim for the cab's going to go back on. I didn't get rid of the nipples and the holes and stuff, so I like the trim. So the wraparound trim's going to go back on there. Outside of that, that's going to be the only trim on the truck. Make for cleaning it a lot easier. But the cab corners and the outer rockers are replaced on it. They are the Goodmark pieces at 20 bucks a piece. Can't go wrong. When you're dealing with something old like this, it's usually better to have a parts vehicle. So the parts truck that I got for the front clip is coming in really handy. The inner part of the cab corners on both sides, I ended up cutting those off of the parts truck and putting it onto this because this was rusted. The passenger inner rocker and some of the floor was rusted, so I cut that from my parts truck. The outer jugs, both sides, are from the parts truck. The ones that were on it were all rusted. Usually they rust out where it's spot welded to the firewall. Some of the firewall around where the heater core goes, the holes are there. I just have it taped over and bonded over. So they'll still be there. But some of that metal is from the parts truck. Most of the bottom of the cowl is freehand. I just cut out a big piece and bent it to fit in there. Some of these pieces, all the metal behind the brake booster bracket, I had to take the bracket off and fix all the metal behind that. Most of that is from the parts truck. Underneath the wiring is all from the parts truck. So a lot of this stuff comes in handy. This windshield pillar post is 13 different pieces of metal. Some of it from this cab, the other cab, and then some of it is freehand. That was not easy, but it wasn't that difficult either. It's just a matter of tacking everything together. Most of it was rusted out. That's the drain for the water that's underneath the windshield. It's supposed to drain through that hole. You can see it's all rusted out. That's the inner framework. That was rusted. The top of the top post of it was rusted underneath the cap of the roof. Almost everything on the bottom was, or along the rail itself, was rusted away. It's a matter of cutting out the pieces that were good, freehanding some of it, and then welding it back together. You can see it's all rusted. This is my new metal, which I had some metal laying around, which was the same thickness as the top of the framing itself. Put it in the vise, make it into a slight V with a little bit of a curve to it. This is just the rest of it. I ended up making a 2-foot section because that's what I needed. And then I pre-curved it where I needed it and then cut off what I didn't need, which is that. So that actually goes underneath the sheet metal and gives you your V pattern for it. So it lines up like that. You got the short side, which welds on there like that, and then the long side will finish the inside of the actual frame under there. So that took a little bit of time, but either way it's done. I just gotta do the body filler on it. Truck's gonna be high. I still need steps. I'm not extremely tall, so I still need steps. I ended up taking the 1-inch square tubing that I have laying around from doing front bumper brackets and stuff. Welded 2 of them together, just 3 welds on both sides of it. cut and sealed the ends of them. I still gotta finish cleaning all the rust off of it, but just cut the bottom and the sides of it, bend it down, and then weld it back together so at least it won't rust from the inside out. And then weld this onto there. This will get welded to the back of the rocker. We don't have the holes, or most people drill the holes through the rocker. I didn't put new rockers on to drill holes in them. So, and that spaces it out away from the rocker. That way it's not sitting right up against it. But I put tape on there because it's already at bare metal. I still got to do body filler on it, so it wouldn't make any sense to paint over the stuff that I need to work on. And plus it'll give me a level line, so when I have my body filler and I hit my paint, I know to stop. So that's why everything's got tape on there. But when I did the cab corner, after I got the inside, the inner bracket for the cab corner set up where I needed it to go, I cut out the old rusted half of it. And when you're putting it on and you line up the back of the cab, the sides of the cab corner, this whole section sticks out. It comes up at an angle and sits out like that. So where you would be spot welding your cab corner to the cab itself, you can't because it's out like that. So I ended up cutting the front of the cab corner off, and I stopped there because the bottom half lines up. Cut it off and trimmed it down to bring it back to where I needed it to be. Welded it back together, and since it has a sharp angle to it, even before you cut it, it has a sharp angle. Your original cab is more of a rounded angle. I put a bunch of tacks on top of it, ground it down so now it's somewhat rounded, and then I'll use my body filler to fill in between the tacks and turn it into round. Same idea you would do if you had a door that had a warp to it and it didn't line up. You could tack onto the edge of the door, give rid of your warp, and then sand it down. So if you want to fill a gap in, that's how you would do it. I'm not a professional. This is just how I did it. The rocker itself, I used most of the rocker just because it has that bowl to it, which you need for your door when the door comes in and out. That gives you the clearance. So I utilized most of the new rocker and just cut it, welded it together. Easy enough on that. The front was a very different story. When you're trying to line up to your doorpost, this body line and then the body line here, it doesn't line up. You can either line up one side or you can't line up the other side. So I used as much of the curve as I could, and then I made my cut. You can only go so high. Where that spot weld is, there's a bracket behind it. So it's really about as high as you can go as far as cutting off old and putting on new. So I made my cut, and then I cut out that. So I took this piece out, and then I continued my cut down the front of the rocker, and I slowly bent it in to where I could get this corner to line up, and then I took a hammer, dolly hammer, and you got to have a long cut to make a short distance. So I tapped it down, light taps, and only getting harder and harder as you come up to kind of get this to fold and not be bent here and curved up like that. So you got to make a long cut to close a short gap. That's usually how it goes. So now I have a nice sweeping curve. You can't tell because it got tape on it, but it has the curve to it. So once I had that tacked into that corner, this one tacked into that corner, I could then trim this piece to fit the new gap, and then just tack it all back together, weld it. I use air every time I tack. I cool it, tack it, cool it. When you're dealing with sheet metal, it warps easy, so it by using air, it gets rid of most of the warping. You just gotta tack it, cool it, tack it, cool it. That's how I do it. Saves a lot of time and effort. You don't have all the warping, and you have very little body filler on there. Less body filler is good. So, a little bit of body filler on that. That fixes that. This wasn't that bad. I had to do the same thing on the other side. Driver's side, I had to make the same cut and set up on there and grind and fit it. So, it's not like it's limited to one side. That's how I ended up doing it. That's the update. That's the paint. And we're getting there. I'll drive it eventually. But yeah, that's my update.